I'm going to be selling most of my Bitcoin and all of my altcoin holdings by the end of this year to the beginning of 2026. And in this video, I want to show you exactly why I'm going to be doing that and why Bitcoin is not going to be entering into a super cycle or an up-only stage in this particular Bitcoin cycle, and why that will happen in future cycles. So I will be selling and I will be avoiding 70 to 80% of a correction on Bitcoin specifically, and up to a 90% correction on altcoins in 2026. And I'm making this video because I think it's super necessary for you to watch it and you to understand why that is the most likely scenario. And hopefully this video can prevent you from losing a lot of your crypto portfolio by not making the mistake, or by making the mistake of not taking profits. Because I did that in 2021. I did that exact same thing. When Bitcoin was at $69,000, I was like, oh my God, this thing is going to go to 100 and beyond. But guess what? Bitcoin did not do that. I should have just looked at the charts and understood that Bitcoin doesn't care about the bullish fundamentals of companies buying and nation states buying and whoever else is buying. It doesn't really matter. What matters is global liquidity. What matters is interest rates. What matters is timing. And in this video, I will show you how that works and how you can follow it to avoid losing 90% of a correction in your crypto portfolio when we get into next year. But before we jump into that, make sure to destroy the like button on this video if you find it helpful by the end of the content, and share this video with any friends who are irresponsibly long on crypto, because I am. I mean, if you look at the current state of my portfolio, it's 65% Bitcoin, 20% altcoins, and then 15% cash allocation, but in stable coins. So everything that I own is in cryptocurrency. I have I don't know where my wallet is, but in my wallet, there's like a little bit of cash just to buy food and whatnot. But everything else that I have is fully in crypto. So I'm somebody that's irresponsibly long, and I would assume that a lot of you are the same since you watch the Crypto Kid channel. And I just don't want you to lose a lot of money in this cycle when everything starts going into the negative when the bear market begins. So let's start with exactly that. Why is there a bear market that begins in the first place? And why is there a bull market that comes to an end in the first place? Well, it all comes down to one guy who lived between the 1880s to the 1940s. He's one of the most famous economists of human history, and his name is Keynes. He created the Keynesian economics, and well, it's essentially a system where there is boom and bust cycles, where the prices of assets and the prices of all assets in general, they tend to face a bit of a correction. And then after seeing a correction, they have a rounding bottom, and then prices skyrocket, they go parabolic. And after going parabolic, they face another significant prolonged correction that creates a rounding bottom on that asset. Then you face a parabolic increase, and then you have a correction, rounding bottom, parabolic increase, then correction, rounding bottom, parabolic increase, and then correction, rounding bottom, parabolic increase. It's the same thing over and over and again. And that is, it happens this way because, not because of, traders, or not because of, I don't know, what you could blame it on, but it takes place because of something called boom and bust cycles. And boom and bust cycles are created by global liquidity. It's created by the manipulation of governments being able to print money out of thin air. Did you know that, guys? Ever since pretty much 2008, and also ever since 1913, when the Federal Reserve in the US was created, the government started having a tool where they can start printing money out of thin air. When the gold standard was over in the 70s, boom, that was the final barrier that blocked the government from creating a printer and just creating new money out of thin air when things were getting into a little bit of tough times. If you have debt as a country, then what are you going to do? How are you going to finance this debt? The easiest way to do it is by printing money or issuing more bonds, which is essentially the same thing, creating more debt and then paying off your problems away. But what that does is it creates a bunch of debt that nobody knows how you're supposed to pay it off. If you go to usdebtclock.org, you can see that the United States of America right now has $36.8 trillion of debt as an entire country. First of all, how are they going to pay this debt? And second of all, who do they owe it to? Pluto? How does the US owe so much money? And this is the greatest economy in the world. Well, the truth is they don't owe it to anybody. They owe it to themselves because they, as the reserve currency country in the world, have the power to print an unlimited amount of their own currency, which is the dollar. And the more money they print, the higher the increase in global M2 money supply, which is the total amount of money in the world. And that's seeming to have a very good correlation with the price of Bitcoin, which we'll explore. But the more money they print, the less valuable it becomes. That's obvious, fundamental high school economics. Even if you go to Fred, which is the official website to calculate the M2 money supply or any other economic metric, this is looking at the total money in the world. Ever since 1985, you've seen a pretty steep gradient of the amount of new money that's created and injected into the economy. Actually, ever since COVID, almost half the money in existence was created since COVID in the past 4 to 5 years. So this is a massive corrupt scheme that countries really love because it's the easy way to get out. And the person that invented it was Keynes. He created Keynesian economics, which politicians loved and decided to follow. They didn't want to use free market principles. They wanted to be able to print money out of thin air and be able to use that money in the way that they want to. But anyways, that's like a very quick and brief history lesson on non-free market economics. Enter Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was created in 2008, 2009 as a way to rebel against this financial corruption. But ironically, it follows exactly in the footsteps, at least in its price appreciation, by the people that created the corrupt system. So the boom and bust cycles can also be referred to as the liquidity cycles. It causes what you can see over on the chart of Bitcoin, the exact same pattern over and over and again. So price dips, price goes up, price dips, price goes up, price dips, price goes up, price dips, price goes up. It's the same thing over and over and over and again. And that's because of the liquidity cycles where governments can control interest rates, the Fed funds rate, they raise it and then they reduce it. When they reduce it, it's better for people to borrow money because they essentially only have to pay 0.5% per year on the money they borrow, and they can put that money into things like Bitcoin or the stock market where your gains per year are over 0.5% on average. And then the reverse happens when they increase the rates. Nobody wants to invest, and you go into a bit of a stagnation in the economy, which is somewhere that we're heading into at this moment in time. But why does all of this matter? It matters because we're coming to a point in the Bitcoin and liquidity cycles where the markets are about to see a top. So this is the Bitcoin cycle comparison chart, and you can go to this chart website. It's bitcoincyclecomparison.com. Click bottom, and you can see the price of Bitcoin. The performance of the price of Bitcoin put onto the previous cycles of Bitcoin since the bottom of since the bottom of exactly all of the previous cycles. So here you can see that Bitcoin is pretty much following the prior 2 cycles almost perfectly. We don't include the Genesis cycle because the first cycle of Bitcoin was just very parabolic and not very sustainable in terms of price appreciation. So it's a bit of an anomalous value to look and contradict and to compare what price is doing now with the initial Genesis cycle. So we tend to forget about that and focus on the 2018 and the 2015 cycles. So when you look at these 3 lines that I have here on my chart, you can see that the overall trend is basically almost the same. The only difference is, obviously, as every Bitcoin cycle passes, because of diminishing returns, which you can notice here on the 12-month time frame, Bitcoin doesn't go up as much as it does in previous cycles. There's a bit of a steepening of the curve, which eventually will be broken, and that will create a super cycle. But that's not going to happen in this cycle, and I'll tell you why. So it's the same. It does the exact same thing. It's just that the price appreciation in every cycle is less than the price appreciation seen in previous cycles. And the top happens almost 515 to 525 days after what is called the Bitcoin halving. This is an event that takes place every 4 years, and it impacts the economics of the entire Bitcoin system. So every 4 years, there's a time that the amount of new Bitcoin or the amount of Bitcoin issued as a reward to miners that validate and protect the network, that goes down by half every 4 years, reducing the profitability of mining and increasing the immediate scarcity of Bitcoin. In fact, in the last halving cycle, or in fact, the last halving event in April 20th of 2024, when we saw that halving event, Bitcoin became the most scarce asset in the world because the net amount of new inflation of new Bitcoins into the system dropped to about 0.8%, Whereas now gold, which is the second scarcest asset in the world, that is sitting at approximately 1.8 to 2.2% of an inflation every single year. So that was a very remarkable turn of events, making Bitcoin the hardest money in existence. And then in the year of 2134, there will be no more Bitcoin left to be mined, making Bitcoin finite in terms of its circulating supply. But anyways, that's like a Bitcoin history lesson that we don't really care about at this moment because we want to know when to sell our cryptocurrency. So usually every 525 days after the halving event occurs, Bitcoin creates a top. Bitcoin reaches a top, then plateaus, and then comes rolling down into a bear market. So that point for Bitcoin would be between the August to October region. And I am taking a little bit earlier by saying August because Bitcoin created a new all-time high for the first time before the halving event because of the institutional capital flow driven by the ETF products that were created. So I think instead of traditionally topping out in October to September, Bitcoin would top out maybe a little bit earlier in August of this year. But time will tell. I think the range of those 3 months are pretty good. And between those 3 months, I will be disallocating from my Bitcoin portfolio as I expect that to be the top because I see that Bitcoin is doing basically the exact same thing as it has done in every other cycle. And I don't see a reason to create a hyper-Bitcoinization super cycle where we break above diminishing returns and start going to $1 million. I don't see that happening this time. Because for that to happen, you need to see a massive amount of adoption that goes into Bitcoin, and you actually do create that network effect at a times to the exponent of 10 scale, which is not happening in this cycle. We're getting a little bit of an introduction into it where nation states are talking about accumulating Bitcoin, and we have Bitcoin treasury companies that are buying Bitcoin via leverage, which isn't sustainable at all. So we're getting a couple of steps closer to it, but it's not really what we want to see, or it's not really what we should see to go into hyper-Bitcoinization, breaking off of diminishing returns and then going to millions of dollars per Bitcoin. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does happen in this cycle, and hopefully I am wrong. I mean, I would love to be wrong because I'm in crypto, all my portfolio, right? But I got to be also a bit level-headed and understand that will not likely happen in this cycle, but probably in the next one or the one after. So in the next 8 years, I think Bitcoin will go into supercycle territory and will go into the millions of dollars per Bitcoin level, especially when, this national debt is not becoming sustainable and there isn't really a way out of it apart from printing even more money, which governments love doing. So the more money they print, the less valuable it becomes, and everything against the dollar goes up in value. And that's why the correlation between the price of Bitcoin and the M2 money supply with a 12-week lead has been kind of remarkable. We're doing exactly the same as what the M2 money supply is showing us that Bitcoin will do. And the reason why there is a 12-week delay is because it takes time from new money to be created via debt issuance, which is bonds, which is loans given by central banks to other banks, traditional banks. That money that's newly created, it takes time to move in the economy to get injected into things like Bitcoin. And that delay is approximately 90 days. That's why we have this sort of correlation between M2 money supply or liquidity and the price of Bitcoin. And actually the price of Bitcoin is now exactly at 102. So we've come to this point basically exactly where we should have come to with a 90-day delay. So it's just proving that this chart is very, very accurate. And very soon, we will reach new all-time highs and head into the $140,000 to $150,000 territory, which will be between the months of July and August. So I think Bitcoin will be doing that. Maybe we can even go into the 180 to 200 region before topping out, because the US has to create $7.5 trillion worth of debt to refinance the amount of bonds that they have to pay maturities on. So they're going to have to do that, and that's going to equate to more money printing, and that could take Bitcoin easily to $200,000 before we see it topping out. But I don't want to give you a price target because it's very tough to call an exact price. But what I can tell you is that very likely Q4 of 2024, Bitcoin will reach its top of this cycle, and then going into 2026, it's going to start going into a bear market again, where it will essentially lose about 70% of its value. The question is, where will the bottom of the bear market be? Maybe the bottom of the bear market will be at $90,000. It depends how much the price of Bitcoin appreciates. The point of question here is that how much percentage will it decrease? And I think that's 70%, given the average of the declines from all-time high to all-time low in previous Bitcoin cycles, and also accounting for the fact that there's more institutional capital in play here that are not paper hands like retail money, which led the growth of Bitcoin's price action in previous cycles. So I think 60% to a 70% drop is possible. If that happens at $200,000, then Bitcoin would come down to about $90,000, which is basically where we are now. So I don't see any issue in investing into Bitcoin at this current price action. And whenever that price is reached, whether it's in August, September, October, November of this year, I'm just going to be selling. Regardless of the price, I'll be looking at the time and sell my Bitcoin into cash positions and then invest that money into real estate, into gold, into silver until late 2026, where we form the bottom of the bear market. And then I reinvest that money fully back into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies again. So that's my prediction for Bitcoin. Essentially, from a price perspective, I think 200K is very likely. Where will it top out? I think if you forget about the price, which is less of an accurate indicator to be predicting, I think the timing of the top will be Q4 of this year. I don't know which month, but I would expect September, October, maybe even as early as August. That could be taking place. And then altcoins, which some of you are more interested in, altcoins will be fully dependent on when quantitative easing begins. So another financial metric to be looking at, and this is looking at the total cryptocurrency market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, so only more degenerate altcoins. When you look into this chart, you can also see a white line that looks at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. So this is another financial vehicle that the governments and the central banks can use to be able to pump and dump markets as they wish to do so, which leads from Keynesian economics. So the Fed balance sheet is right now at a very low point. They've not decided to go out into the market and buy financial assets and increase the amount of money that's in their balance sheet. They did this during COVID to provide stimulus into the economy, revive the markets, and as soon as they started increasing their balance sheet, oh my God, altcoins went absolutely parabolic. They're going to be doing the same thing in this cycle too. I don't think it will be as vigorous as what happened in COVID because it was a black swan event. But I do think the Fed will be increasing their balance sheets in Q4 of this year. And they will also be cutting rates vigorously by Q4 of this year, making it more attractive for people to borrow money and invest into risky assets such as altcoins. So when that happens, altcoins will absolutely fly. I mean, Bitcoin has already surpassed its prior all-time highs in 2021, but you can see that altcoins are massively lagging behind. Some of my favorite altcoins are Ethereum, Solana, Dogecoin. That's where I'm investing my capital into. And you can watch my daily videos to find exactly which altcoins I'm buying at what times. But now altcoins are just super, super cheap because we will go into just altcoins excluding Ethereum. They will go into like a $2 to $3 trillion market cap potentially in this cycle alone. So that's going to give you 10 to 100x opportunities, even in some of the largest cryptocurrencies that are currently trading on the market. So when that happens, because of quantitative easing, because of the Fed cutting rates, that will take prices to sky-high levels. And I think altcoins will top out in Q1 of 2026, so a bit later than Bitcoin topping out. And once that happens, we will also come down crashing by 90% in the previous cycle. But maybe that point is exactly where we are now. So you don't really end up losing too much money if you don't sell, but if you buy now, right? But the thing is, you don't want to lose on your unrealized gains. So to say again, it's impossible to predict exactly where the altcoin market will go. I just think that Ethereum will go to $8,000. I think Dogecoin will go to $1 and Solana to $500. The rest, I don't know. I think they will go up significantly if it's a good project. But I'm currently divested between Bitcoin and altcoins, and I'll be putting this cash allocation very soon into altcoins and Bitcoin again, maybe as early as today. And I'm just expecting tremendous increases for the price of Bitcoin and for altcoins. I think Bitcoin can do another 100% from here. And I think altcoins can do anywhere between 10 to 100x. And the markets will top, and the top will likely happen between Q4 to Q1. So I think now is a good time to be considering investing. And when Q1 of 2026 comes, regardless of how bullish the narratives are, regardless of how many people are buying Bitcoin and altcoins, I don't care. I'm going to be following the cycles. I'm going to be selling my cryptocurrency, putting it into real estate, putting it into different commodities, keeping some in cash. And then end of 2026 to the beginning of 2027, when the bear market is hitting a rock bottom, that's when I will accumulate once again and do the same thing until we reach a super cycle. And at that point, we will all be trillionaires, right? So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope that video wasn't too confusing. I hope it was also an interesting watch and it's giving you some sort of value. If you found it valuable, let me know in the comments. Let me know which altcoins are you holding. Let me know if you disagree with anything that I said. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And I'll see you all on the next video, as always, very soon. Take care. And as always, bye. Bye.